Electricity went out. So what happened? As Gideon Johansson went out to check out what has happened, he saw something unusual in the sky, something that would create one of the most controversial cases, UFO cases, in Sweden in the 60s and 70s. Year 1959, September 29th, in the small town of Mariannelund in Sweden, a sudden power failure occurred. Well, that's what is suggested. We will talk about that later. So it happened at around 6:55 p.m. and Mr. Gideon Johansson, an electrician who was responsible for a small power installation, and his son, Rolf, both rushed out of their house to check what was the reason of that failure. There it was. What they saw there was a glowing object making a slow descent through the trees and coming within a few feet of the ground. The strange object flew slowly down, almost touching the trees in Mr. Johansson's garden, and finally stopped at half a meter on the road. Johansson was able to now see that that is actually a craft of some sorts. And as he said, this craft had a high transparent dome over it. And as he looked more closer, he noticed that inside there are two humanoids that he said had high crowned heads and big, beautiful eyes. The humanoids, as Johansson put it, were engaged in some kind of repairs inside the craft itself. And he said that the vehicle itself was at around 12 feet long and 8 feet high. After a while, this vehicle, together with all of its passengers, simply disappeared in the sky, or as Johansson put it, as a ghost in the sky. Welcome to one of the most controversial UFO cases that happened in Sweden in the 60s, also a little bit into 70s, by Gideon Johansson. So what really happened? Was there a thorough research or any kind of solid evidence taken out from this case? Well, bit by bit, I will kind of try to show you all of the controversial parts of this case, and at the end you can decide yourself if you can believe this guy or if you can believe if this case actually happened. Now let's start out by laying down the facts. So first of all, the date. So usually in these UFO cases, date is something that is the most solid one. Like there is a day and time when something actually happened. In this case, not necessarily. Okay. To figure out what I'm talking about, we have to go a little bit back before this date when Johansson encountered this flying object nearby his house. To be more precise, we actually have to go back 1 year before this encounter. So, in the year 1958, that was the year when Gideon Johansson actually had another experience. Yes, you heard me correctly. This was not his first encounter with something strange from the sky. So, what happened to Gideon in the year 1958? Well, Gideon saw, as he put it, flying telephone receiver and sent detailed, colorful descriptions of this sighting to anyone who was basically interested to see and read that. And despite the great distance, so the object was estimated around 8,000 meters away from him, he had noticed all of the details that other people couldn't see. Okay, so by saying other people, I mean this encounter, like this flying object, was actually seen by more people than just Gideon. He first reported this case to Mr. Sven Schallin, National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, short NICAP, representative for Sweden. He wrote a letter to Schallin in January of 1959, which was 9 till 10 months prior to the landing, basically the case that we started to discuss at the beginning of this video. So remember I told you that this flying object in 1958 was seen not only by Gideon but also by other people? Well, later it was debunked and solved, let's say like that, because what around half of Swedes saw on that day in the sky was actually a bright bolide. So here we can kind of understand how Gideon's brain works. When he sees something, he might add something extra to that, okay? Now, why am I mentioning this? Apart from the fact that it kind of shows a little bit of the characteristics of Mr. Johansson, there was also another interesting thing. So, one of the things that happened after he sent this letter to everyone and Mr. Shalin, more specifically, is that Mr. Shalin actually came to Gideon's house to visit him, to interview and talk to him personally, face to face. And this happened around 6 weeks before the case that we are diving into today. So when he saw the humanoid. Let me tell you, if a person like Mr. Shalin visits your house to talk about your encounter with possibly UFOs, that was a big thing because Mr. Shalin was a highly respected person in the field of UFO researchers in Sweden. So logically thinking, if humanoids are landing nearby your house 6 weeks after Mr. Shalin visits you, you would definitely, no doubt, contact him again because not only he's a respected person in the research area, but he has also established personal contact with you. Well, this was not necessarily the case with Johansson. So what is more interesting now is that Gideon waited for nearly 10 years to finally report about this landing that happened in the 1959 when he saw these humanoids inside this weird craft. He had already retired from his job at the age of 66, and only then he decides to sit down by his typewriter and write a letter where he would lay down everything that he saw on that evening of the year 1959. And now the most surprising fact. He did not send this letter to Mr. Shalin, with whom we already know he had established contact. But he sent this letter to a person named Lars Josteren, representing Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, short ALPRO. Now it's a defunct research group. Why? You had contacts with the government research group and Mr. Shalin, so why didn't you send the letter to him? Well, that's a controversy. I guess we never know why he was thinking like that and why the letter was sent to another person. Probably my assumption is that maybe when Mr. Shalin visited Gideon, Gideon saw Johansson's personality, that there is something off, that he can invent some stuff that you cannot rely on. Or maybe Mr. Shalin said something to Johansson that Johansson didn't like, so that's why he decided to kind of reach out to other channels related to the UFO kind of research field. I don't know what was the thinking behind that, but anyways, the main question here is, undoubtedly, why did he wait for 10 years to report about this encounter that happened in the year 1959. Johansson wrote to Ren the following letter. 8 years ago today, that is September 29th, 1959, something very strange happened at my house on the asphalt street, 3 meters away from my house. A UFO came down there, and just a few moments before that, there was a power outage, so it was very dark. No one believes me, and those who were there and saw it think they have gone crazy. If you want the whole story, let me know, but promise to believe what I write. Otherwise, there is no point in it. Josteren, of course, accepts this offer to find out more. And as a follow-up, Johansson sends him like a 3-page description of this account. Then another really interesting and tiny inconsistency happens. When Gideon writes to Ren in the second letter, he says that he wants to describe this encounter that happened to him, mind you, on one of the last days of October at 6:55 p.m., almost 7 years ago. And we all remember what he said in the first letter. It was 8 years ago, and it was September. So was this a mistake? Well, you usually don't make mistakes like that when you report as serious matter as UFO encounter. Interestingly enough, Ren does not pay attention to this mistake or does not really notice. We don't know what happened, but in fact, Ren replies to Johansson by saying, "Thank you for sharing this information that is very important for UFO research world." So I did not find any information if this correspondence went any further than just correspondence. In my opinion, it ended like that. So Johansson sent all the information to Ren. This was not really researched further. He just said, "Thank you, goodbye." But later, this incident that Johansson reported to Ren was included in Ren's book called Flying Saucers, Documents and Theory. So he kind of took it as granted that everything that Johansson said was correct. I don't know what was the thinking, but that's what happened. So, but it would be really nice to kind of see all of these letters that Johansson wrote to Ren, because basically he was laying out everything that happened during that night and how it all looked. Well, actually, there is a place where the original letters of Gideon Johansson to Ren have been preserved. The story was in one of the letter folders that was fortunately rescued at the last moment from a garbage room behind Ren's home in Bromma shortly after his death. Ren's complete collection of letters is now, as I found out, at the Archive for UFO Research in Norrköping. And here it is, without any Ren's edits, what Gideon wrote to him when he said he would like to hear the story. And here it goes. One of the last days of October at 6:55 p.m. almost 7 years ago, there was a power outage in a small town in Småland and its surroundings. I was an electrician and was in charge of the switchgear for the mill where I was employed. I was on my way out of my home to do my maintenance work when I met my son, 25 years old. He asked, "What's wrong?" I replied, "There was a power outage." He replied, "Yes, it's pitch black everywhere, but not up there in the air." I looked up and saw white light and assumed this might be an airplane. Then he continues that soon they understood that it's not an airplane and started to think that it might be a helicopter, but then again soon discarded this idea since this flying object did not make a noise and it also radiated out this weird white light. And later on in the letter, he continues that as this object disappeared, it briefly touched the tops of the tree, which they checked on the following day, and then they saw that there is a little damage on the top of these trees. Also, he described that this vehicle kind of landed down on his street and was floating above it, a couple of meters above the street. And at one point, this object was literally a couple of meters away from them, so they could see inside. And they saw inside that it's illuminated with this bright light, and this is where they saw the humanoids inside. I walked inside the fence of my property along the street. I saw that it halted by the stop line for a few moments, and then, voila, it turned off the light and disappeared. We could not see where it went. We stared into the empty darkness. No sound, nothing. It was gone. Then, according to Gideon Johansson, the electricity came back after a couple of minutes, as if nothing had happened. And he said that even the electricity company could not explain what happened and what caused that. Meaning we can assume that Johansson probably contacted the electricity company. Maybe they know something more about that. And also Gideon continues to mention some of his colleagues who also allegedly saw this thing. However, there are no documented interviews with these colleagues as nobody could actually find them or contact them. In fact, Anders Lindgren, who is a prominent figure in UFO research and is a co-founder of the Archives for UFO Research, AFU in Sweden, in his own investigation done in 2004, mentioned that he managed to interview all of Gideon's closest workmates. What he came out with was that none of them had ever heard about the UFO landing or seen something themselves on that night. The first time they heard about this case, actually, and the Gideon's experience was after Wren's book Flying Saucers Documents and Theory came out. Well, there is one thing, though, in Gideon's letters to Wren, where he says that he and his colleagues, who allegedly also saw this thing, agreed that they would keep it a secret because people would most probably think that they are crazy. I guess he tried to justify the fact that he's coming out with this only 10 years later. He's already old, so there's no way back. There's nothing to lose. But anyways, I don't know, why don't the colleagues now come out also, after all of these years, now that Gideon has also come out? It doesn't make sense, actually. And in addition, there is no documentation of an electric blackout at the factory, of the area, or the housing area. The local newspaper reported about the lack of water in the local river, which almost prevented pulp production at the factory where Gideon Johansson was working, but said not a word about an electric blackout. Or, for that matter, damages to power lines, which is weird because things like that are usually mentioned in the local newspapers. The local news reporter who moved from this town away in the year 1964 had never heard about this Johansson's encounter before. Lindgren, when he was doing his research, in the year 1996, reached out to this reporter as a source of somebody who worked in the local newspaper and probably knows something. And this guy was like, no, first time hearing. So where is this story actually coming from? Maybe we should try to find some connections elsewhere. So let's briefly talk about another case that is believed to somehow have influenced Gideon Johansson's perception of everything, and also probably served as kind of inspiration for reporting this case. This case that might have influenced, as some believe, is a case that is called William Gill sighting. The Gill sighting, as it was reported then in Sweden, has many elements common to Gideon Johansson's case. So why do some believe that this case have influenced Gideon Johansson so much is also basically because it happened during that time and was reported on the news outlets during that time, because Gill encounter happened in the year 1959, so the same time. It happened in Papua Guinea, and it's basically an encounter that happened to an Anglican priest. So what happened was, over 2 consecutive nights in June 1959, this priest and 37 others reported seeing a disc-shaped craft with humanoid figures on top. The witnesses claimed that when they waved at the figures waved back. This incident is considered one of the most credible UFO sightings due to the number of witnesses and detailed documentation. Knowing the brief facts of this Papua Guinea case, you can see that maybe this has served an inspiration for Gideon Johansson, because you have basically almost everything there except the many witnesses. So basically what we have now here is Gideon's son and himself. Also, Gideon's story with the years grew in the size, and in fact, most of the people who knew Gideon said that he was known to be quite a storyteller, not about UFOs only, but also about other things. So I am at least starting to lean towards the idea that he was just really into UFOs, was inspired by other stories, and kinda invented his own, but we cannot be sure, of course. And we can see the tendency of getting inspired by something like this even further if we look in the cases of UFOs in Sweden during that time. In fact, one of them is very, very popular, and I have also covered it on my channel. So this is the story of Gösta Karlsson, yes, the guy who saw the saucer. They were also humanoids, and also at the end, this encounter helped him to become also a millionaire. So if you haven't heard about that story, side note, I will link that video down in the description box. You should definitely watch that. It's so interesting and actually a little bit similar to this Johansson's case. And understand me correctly, I am not calling Gideon Johansson a liar. I'm just pointing out that this guy might have had quite a vivid imagination, and he might be very easily impressed by the stories that he was reading during that time on news outlets. And I'm also very analytical and using my brains and putting things together. So in my opinion, this could be the case of Gideon just trying to invent something that not necessarily happened in that way. But let me tell you this, apart from this narrative that he just invented the story to get attention or whatever was his reason, there is another kind of explanation that could kind of explain what he saw during that night. The rest probably he just added by himself. But something did really happen in that area that could be the reason for Gideon inventing this story. You see, in the autumn of 1959, when this happened to Gideon, there was a large military exercise involving more than 900 infantry soldiers close to Mariannelund. The exercise was all over eastern Sweden and involved hundreds of Swedish Air Force planes swarming also over Mariannelund. Maybe Gideon did really see some part of this exercise in the air, and the rest was kind of his imagination based on the newspaper news about other encounters in the world. We don't know. And of course, I think it was mentioned in one of the researchers by the Swedish UFO research guys that none of the soldiers during that exercise actually reported about encounters with UFOs or something strange in the sky. Yes, probably if this was the case, this would not be published. But I don't really believe that anything strange happened during that night in the sky, but that is just my opinion, okay? Now, all in all, this makes me assume that what Gideon Johansson and his son really saw on that night was a military parachuted light or some other light connected to the exercise which was going on right in the direction where the light was seen. I mean, if a person is already prone to interpreting things in the sky in a certain way, remember how he described the bow light that he saw a year before that? It might seem like seeing something like this could also cause the story in his head to go like this. So, as I mentioned, all of the Gideon's letters are in the archives of AFU, and one of another like prominent UFO researchers in Sweden, namely Claes Swan. His name was I was also mentioning in other videos where I was talking about UFOs in Sweden. So he went through all of these letters and kind of concluded a little bit about Gideon Johansson's personality even further. So what he got from these letters is that Gideon was actually kind of like a mystic. So he was also telling that he had some kind of telepathic contacts with beings in the space after this encounter. So according to Swan, in these letters, Gideon would claim he was sent mental images of the visitor's home planet, a world on the other side of our sun, where the people never saw sunlight because of thick layer of fog that enveloped their planet. Now, this again is interesting fact taken out from these letters, because similar things can also be found in another famous UFO case. A man named Truman Bertram, a man from the USA who claimed he could contact aliens from the planet Clarion. He wrote books about it, and it happened exactly around the same time before Gideon's experience in the 1950s. Also, in these letters from 1970s, you can find some other interesting stuff that he's mentioning. Like, for example, he's mentioning that he knows some kind of secret, and the secret being about some kind of pipe, like coming from, I guess, alien vehicle or something that the government has found, and now they are keeping in a secret base, and that the truth about it will come out sometime around the 21st century. Well, he doesn't mention where is this basement and what's gonna happen, etc., etc. No details, just like this broad claim that there is this pipe, alien pipe, in a secret base, and soon the truth will come out. And as for Gideon's son Rolf, who was a witness together with him, he only confirms the first phase of the sighting, a brilliant light over the nearby 3-storied building. So even Rolf doesn't support the story of the craft flying over the street and the humanoids inside. So, as I promised you, this case has a lot of layers. We kind of tried to figure out who is Gideon Johansson, what might have influenced him to tell this story. However, you never know. Maybe this was truth, and maybe he saw something, of course added something from himself, but maybe there was something. So now it's time for you. Let me know, what do you think about Gideon Johansson, his encounter, about the facts that we know? Do you believe him or do you not? Just drop down in the comment section your thoughts. All in all, I don't really think there were aliens, but you never know. That being said, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for your support. Shout out to David Craig, my all-time first and so far only Patreon. So if you want to support me on Patreon, here's the link. It's also in the description down there, so you can support me with some finances, or if not, just simply press those likes. Make sure you have subscribed and left a comment, because it pushes out my content to more viewers. That being said, stay curious, check out the sky now and then, and see you next time!